Alright, let's do this. So my main takeaway from the Spyro Reignited trilogy is that a lot of things gameplay-wise have been relatively unchanged, or little tweaks have been made, but not really huge upgrades compared to the Crash trilogy, which I mentioned in one of my past videos. But the biggest thing that the Reignited trilogy provides is a large, fresh coat of paint to make everything really aesthetically pleasing and great to look at. And the biggest thing that I've seen a lot of people really latch onto, especially leading into the original release of the game, is the Spyro 1 Dragon redesigns. And seeing how they decided to be redesigned in order to be a little bit more unique compared to their PS1 counterparts, because that's really easy to do. So I decided to make a video at the beginning of April, just kind of making a bunch of really weird jokes and some truths about how I felt about each specific dragon in the Spyro 1 remaster. And I felt like I needed to be a little bit more serious now and actually do a proper ranking of all of the Spyro 1 dragons. But since I'm really bad at ranking stuff properly, I've decided to not go with just my number one favorite dragon out of them all and split them all into their respective categories based on the worlds that you rescue them in. So there's going to be 5 categories. One for the Artisan world, Peacekeepers, Magic Crafters, Beast Makers, and Dreamweavers. I then realized that there was a lot of one specific dragon in each of the lists that were reaching the bottom of the list almost all the time. So what I decided to do was make a 6th category, take out about 15 of the dragons, and create what I call a senior category for a majority of the old dragons that are in the game. Not all of them are in there because there are some that I really like, so we're gonna see who is the best old boy out of the bunch in that case. So, 6 categories, 6 of my favorite dragons. Let's get into it to make sure that this video is not super long. So let's start in the Artisan worlds, because it's the first one, so we might as well. I'm gonna start with Oswin, because he's kind of at the bottom of the list for mine. I'm not really sure what to make of his design, and I think it really just has to do with where you find him, because he's kind of in a library and such. But his design doesn't really do a whole lot for me. Especially when it came to my joke video about it, he was one of the last dragons for me to actually find a joke for. And I had trouble finding a whole lot to do with the Dreamweavers in that specific video. So yeah, Oswin, not much, he's pretty simple. Nevin is next. There are a few painters in the Artisan worlds, so it's really based on preference of how you deem each painter to be better than the other, but Nevin is kind of the worst out of the other painters that are around there because he's just the one with the palette. He has a little fiddly mustache on him and the feather cap, but not much else for him either, and he's the one who's supposed to be giving you advice on Toasty, the boss, who is very easy to deal with compared to his dogs. So yeah, not much connection there either. Unfortunately, though, a lot of the dragons in the Dark Hollow are kind of my least favorite in the Artisan world, because next is Albin, who is one of the writers of the Artisan lands. Maybe it's just because of his demeanor or just his entire body language of his animation, but it doesn't really click with me a whole lot with how he decides to deal with you, especially because he just goes, oh, it's you. Like, he doesn't have a connection with Spyro at all. At least he does make sure that his inkwell doesn't spill everywhere when he decides to launch into the air after you rescue him. Then there's Darius. He's, out of the 3, he is my favorite out of Dark Hollow, but that doesn't really mean much. He's the theater major out of all of them, and really stretching the word of Artisan a whole lot. I guess the real reason why I like him is that he does have 1, the rose, 2, the skull, and he does a lot of skull tricks as well while you're talking with him. But everything else about him I just really don't like. He is that snarky theater teacher that you either really clicked with or really don't click with at all when you were in high school, or even university if you decided to go that far with it. Alvar is next up, and his demeanor is not that welcoming either. I'm just kind of looking for someone who's actually friendly, but he's not great either. If you're needing a cook, he's one of the few that are around in all of the worlds, but there's a lot better ones, trust me. I think the one thing that really catches my eye is that he has a novelty ketchup bottle in his apron. But yeah, like I mentioned in my other video, him just blindly throwing his cleaver around is very dangerous, and I wouldn't want to spend too much time or get too close to him. I only put Niles or Nils I still don't know how to pronounce his name this high up on the list because he's the sculptor out of the dragons and he does make a Spyro bust. And I kind of like his concept art a whole lot, but when it comes to his actual design, he is ridiculously simple. Like, I'm gonna say this about a couple of the dragons, but wow, there's not much to the imagination when it comes to Nils, yeah. When it comes to Argus, the real reason why he's up this high is because of the end scene at the end of the game, because he does kind of show a little bit more characterization, especially when it comes to sheep basketball, but why, I still don't understand why they gave him a watermelon just to hold. It just makes him more odd than anything else. But he's just kind of there. But if you need someone to play basketball with, there you go. He's good. Okay, let's actually sit down and talk about Gavin for a moment, because he's kind of in the middle of my list for the artisan category, and my main joke is that I have a lot to say about Gavin. People really like Gavin. I am exhausted mentally looking at Gavin. He is the most overly designed dragon out of all of them, out of all 74, he's the most overly designed, because if we just kind of go through all of the things that are on his design, he has the fancy mustache, he has the bull nose ring, he has spacers in his horns, he has a full arm tattoo, he's a barista, he pours coffee with his tail and uses his tail hooks to hold other things. He wears suspenders, he's a bit of a narcissist, and he is buff and like kissing his biceps. There is too much. There's too much here. Somebody really got into it when designing him, and maybe was thinking not with their head on this one. There's just a lot. There's so much here, and I'm like, I can only respect it so much, but there's too much. You really just like laid it all out for me to not even begin to even imagine or make up any sort of characterization in my own head for this guy. He's just there. There you go. There's Gavin. Thomas is next, and I had to look through the footage again to make sure that he actually does play his lute, like, once. And he does as he's disappearing when you rescue him. He's okay. He is really well animated and definitely just has that caring nature behind him and has a lot of pep in his step. And I kind of like that a whole lot. He's the bard, and I really like to hear him actually play a song, but I know that's too much in order to put into a game like this. I don't know. I like him a lot. The next two kind of flip back and forth because they have very similar names. One is Devlin, the baker, because how could you not like him because he, as you rescue him, boom, he creates a cake and that says thanks Spyro on it, because that is just good planning on his part. That's really good. He's also just kind of friendly. Always good to have a baker in your life who's very nice and welcoming and good. He's nice. I like him. Thanks, Spyro. Here we go. Have cake. So Delbin is the artist that a lot of people really just kind of latch onto. I know that I did that a lot with his original design, just because he was gruff but super helpful. And now he's just like the buff artist. Like, he's okay, but I find that he's really more focused on just like looking at his art than going like, oh, Spyro, okay. It's like he's more a little bit self-conscious where he doesn't want to showcase how he paints dragonflies a whole lot. So it's like, yeah, I'm buff, but I'm shy at the same time. There's something to dig in with this kind of characterization with him. I'm also just noticing now that in the subtitles, they use the wrong your. Good. So now we have our top three, and my top three consists first of Lindar, who is definitely the most characterized out of all of them, because one, it's his fault that this game actually happened because he's the one who antagonizes Nasty. Second, he's the clockmaker, and I just have a weird affinity for clockmakers. I find that their characterization can be all over the place, but is always interesting in order to just absorb and enjoy. And three, I find that there's a past background with Lindar and Spyro, because I find that Spyro hangs out with Lindar a whole lot, and that's where he gets his impulsive nature from, especially when it's just like wink wink, not that you ever run into troubles, like you always do, because I always have to find out about it and I have to babysit you. So it's always good that that's there and that exists. It's good. And yeah, compared to everybody else, I'm also a sheep and really like Nestor. Nestor is very simple when it comes to his design, but it's really just nice to attach to. Unless you like to just defy the system, he is always the first dragon that you release, so he is a fantastic first impression to the rest of the redesigns. So if you didn't do a good job redesigning Nestor, that would be a bad flag in my books for how the rest of it was going to be. He also showcases a whole lot of different emotions when it comes to everything. So there's him looking at you the first hand. He's stern, but he's caring. He's respectful. And yeah, they're just everything to like about him. I don't think I could find a person that really just dislikes Nestor. I think the main thing is that he is fairly simple in his design, outside of giving him, I guess, what, a cowl? A very small cowl? And a puffed sleeve? Okay. And it's definitely subjective opinion and just complete bias that my favorite out of the Artisan Dragons is Gildas. He's the old grandpa. He is, in my opinion, the best of the three painters of all of them, and there's everything to like about him just because of his characterization. He's certainly a messy painter because of all the paint that is everywhere on him and probably will never come out anymore. But if I'm ever looking for a good time, I should just go and see him. Every time I look at him, every time I look at his face, and I did allude to this in my joke video, that he just makes me happy. And with how 2019 has kind of been going, I just kind of go back and go, yeah, he helps me a lot when it comes to whenever I'm feeling down. So he's a good favorite for me. Alright, next up we're going to move on to the Peacekeepers category. Really on the bottom of the list is a dragon that really doesn't get a whole lot in order to do anything, so it's less the game's fault and more, I don't know really whose fault it is. It's kind of an equal fault, because it's a mix of me and also the game's fault, because you only get a thank you for releasing me for it, and that's Andor. He is, again, a kind of simple Western design. He doesn't get a whole lot of screen time in order to show things off. He bows. Not much to just grab onto. I already made the joke that he's kind of like Bubba, and we'll talk about Bubba when we get to the Beast Makers. But yeah, not much to really say about him when you can compare him to a lot of other dragons. The same about Enzo, because he just kind of directs you away from him and there isn't a great conversation piece with him. The thing about the Peacekeepers is that you kind of wish that you had a little bit more background detail with what they kind of did in order to be considered a Peacekeeper. But when it comes to Enzo, I don't know what kind of action he would have taken. There's not a lot of history behind him, or at least nothing to allude to. Next up is Ragnar. There are two things I like about Ragnar. One is when you immediately free him, his main weapon is actually his tail hammer, which he kind of uses just as like a rest for his right arm. And the second thing is because you're in the ice caves, he does have actually steam coming out of his nose. I know that isn't a lot, but it's there too. I also made the Bubba joke with him, because yeah, there isn't much for him either, which is unfortunate. Next up is Ulrich, and I kind of want to like him more because his design like involves just him being like a foot soldier with a very small shield and short sword. It's a little bit cartoonish in that regard, but I wish there was kind of more to him than that. I think like his design could have been pushed a little bit more. I think it was just kind of made like half-dash almost. Like I doubt he would ever use that tiny little sword for anything because of how big he decides to actually proclaim it actually is. His animation for bashing his shield, though, is really nice. Makes me kind of think there should be more of him, but because of the way that Spyro 1 just kind of wants to make a lot of individual designs, Ulrich seems out of place because should be like a legion of him instead of just one. Kind of makes him tragic too. Maybe bump him up on the list eventually, thinking about him too much. There's a few of the Peacekeepers that also have what I consider to just be like the helpful bro voice, and Gunnar is one of them. The main thing that Gunnar has going for him is that he all of a sudden just decides to just drop the term of destiny on Spyro, but beyond that, he's just full of teeth. I do kind of like his eye patch, though. We're going to get into more of just like, okay, why does he have an eye patch? Hey, there you go. Next up is Todor. I really like Todor because he's unique in a sense. He's the only archer out of all of the dragons, except his design kind of falls a little bit because of his, I guess the fluffy kind of collar he has is the same as his quiver almost. And I kind of wish it was a little bit different because when I first saw him, I'm just kind of going like, why is there 2. It looks like something was a little bit off until I realized he had a quiver. He also has 1 arrow inside of that quiver. I'm going like, you're not going to be much help, dude. Then we have Marco, who is an interesting case because he's one of the first who has an interesting wing design, and that he either did have wings beforehand, or through some sort of casualty he did not, or through some sort of incident he lost his wings and then had to make his own, or someone else made them that we never really get a chance to actually meet. Probably made them themselves at this point, because there's really not a mechanic in this game. Maybe the balloonist did it? I don't know. The thing I kind of don't like about him is that his design and his voice don't match for me. He has the bro voice, but he seems to be a lot older than what he lets on. So yeah, he kind of sits in middles around the middle of the list for me. Titan is the first dragon that you rescue in the Peacekeepers world, and just kind of sets you on your way. He's really just like smack dab in the middle of the list because I want to like him more, but I struggle to figure out what I could like him more for. He seems like a fighter, but again, like a lot of the dragons, they really don't have a whole lot of animation going for them in order to like them a little bit more. Like, I want to see him swing his axe or actually do something. I want to see all the dragons do something, to be completely honest. But no, they just kind of just stay on their pad because that's what they've always done. And with Titan, he seems like a man of action. I kind of want that a little bit more. Then you have Maximus, which is kind of the Peacekeepers version of Devlin from the Artisans. He's the chef. He likes meat, and it's like if you're ever wanting like the two of them to meet, and they could just like do a whole streamline of food, and it would be super good. People have latched onto him as well because his design is really interesting. He's all neck, like that's kind of the most pronounced thing about him. Mixed in with he definitely contenderized something with his weapon of his. He's got that going for him. Trondo, I'm kind of in the same boat with when it comes to Gavin, but Trondo I like a little bit more than Gavin because he's not as over-designed. The main thing Trondo has is that he's the dragon with dreads, and I'm not understanding why that has to really do anything with his design. I just like his animations a whole lot. He is very expressive. But again, like I mentioned before, he probably would never use that knife. Like, I think he is a dragon that is all talk when it comes to everything that he actually kind of says. He's a whiny boy. He's angry, but he's probably got a good... He's probably the one who has the good heart inside of him. So I've been kind of ruined on Boris, to be completely honest, because I read an article called the top 5 most effable dragons in the Spyro Reignited trilogy, and Boris was on there and was considered a sub. Yeah. That's where I kind of just mashed the two together and called him Sub Bubba, because, again, I made a Bubba joke. Because the bell, the whip, just everything about him going, like, he looks super tough, but he would just, like, be under, like, he would just... Yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna stop there. I still like him a whole lot because he is really expressive at the same time. That close-up just kind of sticks with me after he asks about the gliding question. I still like him. He's just been ruined. What is the whip actually for? So now for my top 3 in the Peacekeepers. First up is Magnus. I put him at 3rd because I really do like Magnus, but I don't like Magnus compared to a lot of other people like Magnus. And they have their own reasons for doing that. When it comes to me, Magnus is definitely the one of the dragons that is the most inspired design-wise. He is the sumo wrestler out of all of them, and he's also very, very well animated. I like him a whole lot when it comes to his demeanor, his expressions, and just his overall presence compared to everything. And then you get to see him twice, and they actually do a little bit more with him. He shows off mostly more sumo poses. But compared to with other characters' designs, like saying Gavin or Trondo, where I consider them over-designed, Magnus is just kind of like just right when it comes to what they were, I guess, kind of being inspired by. Second is Halvar. I really like Halvar because of my own personal development that I've made for Halvar. He's a very simple design as well. He has the bro voice, but the simple hues of purple I kind of like on him, and the way that he actually handles his giant hammer. I have a feeling that his hammer and Halvar have a history together, like they've been around since he was like as small as Spyro, so it's just like I'm just imagining Halvar being tiny with a hammer that was the same size, and him growing to actually match his hammer one day. I'm going like, this is really endearing, and I kind of like him a whole lot, especially with how your conversation with him ends. It's just like, he holds his hammer really nice. What am I talking about? Like, it's just good. This is good. And then lastly, there is Conan. Conan is my favorite of the Peacekeepers. I know it didn't seem that way in my joke video because I said that he was kind of like out of place. But when I was talking about, say, Enzo at the very beginning of the list, Conan is the example of how to really do character design really well in order for me to question his background, even though there isn't a whole lot. There is a piece of really good fan art for Conan out there that kind of shows off a little bit more of his design, and it doesn't show off well in the game, but you notice that his shield is a little bit broken, but his lance is also bent at the top. So he looks a little bit more worn and has seen combat because he's a little bit older compared to everybody else. So I kind of think of his history and what he kind of did. Overall, it really makes me think a whole lot more about what good character design can make a player think about a specific character, even though there really isn't much reason to. But I like doing it a whole lot. So Conan's really good for that area. Plus he just looks distinguished. Even though he's much older, he still has the word I keep going back to is deportation, but he presents himself very well. So that's kind of why Conan has become my favorite of the Peacekeepers. Next up is the Magic Crafters world, and we're going to start with Ajax, because I do not understand Ajax character design at all. I'm not sure what direction they were trying to go with how to show off Ajax when it comes to the magic and the wizards and whatnot. I think it was kind of lost in design. He's got the ram horns going on, and there are a few of the dragons that have the weird long beard thing going off of theirs, and I'm just not a fan of that kind of design on anything. But yeah, I feel like there's something lost with Ajax. So I'm not sure what, but there isn't much for me to really connect with this one. Zane is the book reader for the Magic Crafters, and there isn't much to him either, other than he is a very big coward. And I find with his design, he has a light off of his hat that he could use for reading, but it's so high up because he has such a very tall hat, or I guess a third horn going on, that I don't know if it's actually that useful or practical on him. So I'm kind of more frustrated with Zane than just kind of confused by him. Cyrus is next, and kind of the same complaint I have with Zane is that Cyrus has a whole lot of candles that are just all over the place, especially on his horns and on the tip of his hat, and I'm not entirely sure of the practicality other than saying, ooh, he's a wizard, so candles. But I like him a little bit more than Zane because his demeanor is a little bit better, but still undesirable. Said that before in my joke video. He seems like a great time. But the main thing I like about him is that the beginning of his animation, he does just kind of call his staff, and I don't know, I kind of like that bit of the animation, but not much else. Then we have Kelvin, who they kind of went with a more antler design on the top of him, and there's a lot more to like about him. He's one of the feather designs for his wings, and he has a whole lot more going on with him. There isn't anything to really pinpoint what Kelvin is all about, because he has scrolls, he has books, he has the orb on his tail. I don't know, I think I just keep coming back to the voice, because I just like when R's are rolled in a bit there. It's just the teeth that are really off-putting at the same time. They really did a number with the teeth. It's like not like Gunnar teeth, but just like very nibbly, little bitey teeth. Cosmos is next, and he's a pompous asshole, and I've already said that it's like he really is not someone who is into conversation a whole lot. He just tells you what you need to do, and then the second time, because they brought him back a second time, he just says it in an overly, I guess, it's not even enthusiastic, it's just really weird way of saying, like, thank you for releasing, or actually, thank you for rescuing me. He doesn't say releasing. He goes off of the trend of this game. I don't know, I like him more because I can laugh at him a little bit more. He's right in the middle of my list because I'm at a mix of laughing at him because I hate him so much, and I hate him so much because he's an asshole. He keeps holding his staff like he's going to lead a band. and a marching band. And that just makes me crack up a whole lot. So yeah, there we go. He also twirls it around, which sometimes they do. They love twirling that mace. Oh boy. Okay, gotta get off of him. Moving on. Xantor's next, and I already made the joke of him being kind of the Gambit of this game because he plays with cards a whole lot. But I also like that at the same time because he does a whole lot with cards, and I kind of think about what the ramifications of, like, oh, I am the magician who does a whole lot of card tricks is. How is that helpful when it comes to the Magic Crafters world? Can you do a little bit more with the cards other than just, like, swirling them around? Or are you just bored? Not entirely sure. But again, it's Gambit. You either kind of like Gambit or you don't like Gambit. And Gambit as a dragon just hits the nice spot for me. Next up is Jarvis, who is the Hogwarts professor. Just straight out, like, he fits so well into, like, the first two Harry Potter movies and how they were stylized, and he's the one with the wand that loves swishing and flicking it. I like that a lot, and when it comes to his design, he has the feathers going on, he has the scrolls on his side, and more specifically, instead of having like a standard dragon mouth, it looks like he has more of a bird beak going on, and I really like that. Should also mention that Jarvis is kind of my third favorite of the Magic Crafters. They're slim pickings, because of the way that I actually made these lists. So my second favorite of the Magic Crafters is Cedric, and I know that's a little bit weird because Cedric's pretty simple, but I kind of just like that about him in this case. Cedric kind of stands for the opposite spectrum of what I've already been talking about with some of the other dragons that I really like, where on one end of the spectrum they're very expressive and very animated, and I like that a whole lot. Cedric is the other way around. He is very stoic, simple, and his animations are very quick, but still get the message across. So when he's talking about jumping and gliding, he will just do like the very smallest of hops and will open his wings up a little bit, and that's all he will do. And I love that they decided to do that little flair to it compared to having anything else happening. He's also a better book reader than Zane because it feels like he's a cool guy to just like chill around with and have a good talk with. And of course, my favorite of the Magic Crafters is Lucas. He is a fantastic design. I saw his concept art before anything else, and I instantly loved what they were doing. It was very inspired of what they were trying to do. His horn design, a lot of the different dragons have that kind of design, but I kind of like his the best. And he is one of the three dragons, and my favorite of the three, who has a lot of designs on their wings. So he's the one with the treasure map on it. Again, I want to go treasure hunting on him. And the last thing that really just dove it in there is his animation, again, really expressive. He does the jump in animations for the stones in order to get into the first flight zone in the Artisan world, and it's just like, yes, everything about this is a yes, thank you, 10 out of 10, love this design. Moving on, that's the Magic Crafters. On to the Beastmakers. So, unpopular opinion, Cypern is actually at the bottom of my list for the Beastmakers. People really like him, and mainly that's just because of his demeanor and because of his shape. No, not at all. I really, really don't care for Cypern. He's very, very laid back, almost too much for me. A lot of the Beastmakers' popularity is just because of the southern connections they do it, because of the swamp area. But with Cypern, I'm just like, no, this isn't attaching to me at all. Especially when he really sounds like he does not care about anything that you're doing. So no, forget Cypern. Not for me. Roscoe is next on the list. He's kind of the outside design compared to the rest of the trend of how the Beastmakers were redesigned. I like him a little bit more because when I kind of think of a lot of the Beastmakers characters and how they are, I watched Oh Brother, Where Art Thou a lot more. Recently, in the last few weeks, and just like Roscoe just kind of fits as like the stocky character in any sort of Western or early 20th century placed piece of media, if that makes any sense. I don't know, I like him for that reason, but there isn't much else to really draw on with Roscoe other than his general design. Bruna I kind of like, but he's the example of almost too much energy that they tried to put in there. So, like, even when he's, like, swiping at the very beginning and his hat is popping off, it might just be in my footage, but it doesn't look like the animation is really all that finished or as smooth as it could be, and that kind of takes it away on a technical level for me. And like I said with Roscoe, he's kind of the same, where he's a southern gentleman. He could be in any sort of media with that, but I don't have much else to really tag on with him. He used to be such an ass swamp. Again. Next up is Claude. Claude is okay. With a lot of the Beastmakers, they have a lot of tribal ornaments and kind of simple things that they're adorned with. When it comes to these first four that I've been really talking about, or at least with Claude, Bruno, and Roscoe, they kind of just are interchangeable a whole lot because there isn't anything to really attach yourself to, which is annoying. I guess kind of the same could be said for Siddiqui. Siddiqui has a little bit more going for him because he has the four-horn design on the top of him, but again, there isn't much because he's very similar to the design compared to everybody else. I'm just kind of a little bit frustrated with the Beastmaker designs because I want to like them more if I had a little bit more context as to what, quote, the Beastmakers actually do. They seem to be a little bit more ritualistic, I guess. A lot of them have like a staff or some sort of totem that they have with them. I don't know, I'm kind of lost with especially like half the list. I'm lost. And it's really obvious like which ones I kind of like connect with a little bit more, to be honest. Next up is Lyle, who it's the demeanor that really gets me in order to bump him this high on the list compared to everybody else. He's very similar to Argus because he carries something and really not really understanding why he decided to carry a certain thing because, again, context is kind of missing. I'm not sure. But I don't know. He's better than the rest of them because the Beastmakers category for me is very messy. So now let's get into our top three. So Cletus is my number 3, because he's still confusing even to this day, just because of what he says. He seems so happy in order to see Spyro, and then he's like, whoa, well, I gotta go. It's like, you don't. Like, where are you going? Come back, I want to look at you more. His design is a little bit better as well for me. His wing design is very unique compared to the rest of them. I hazard a guess as to what he could possibly be doing. The weirdest thing that I could think of is like, oh, he's a spy because he has camouflage all over him, but that is a really easy guess to make. Why do you have to have that kind of headdress, or is that really your horn design? There's a lot of mystery behind Cletus to me, and that's what really grabs my attention. So yeah, Cletus, he's gotta go, but I don't want him to poke his brain a little bit. Next up is Isaac, and for Isaac, the first thing that I noticed is that he really feels like a mix between the Beastmaker design and the Magic Crafters design, so he's kind of like a blend between the two. And the second thing is actually the joke I made, because his wand is obviously a Wavemaster wand from .hack, and that is just super cool that that was decided to be the design that they put in for this dragon, and like, I'm all over it. Super, super good. My own personal bias. Hooray! Looks good. I'm gonna listen to more Seesaw now. Be back in a moment, and then we'll go on to the number 1, who is the very obvious choice. Yeah, Bubba is my number 1 for the Beastmakers. There really isn't a contest in that regard. Bubba is just Bubba. He is super expressive. He is super energetic. He has so much going for him. So much fan art. Just be careful, because oh, the fan art gets, it's a hole. It's a hole. I'm just going to mention it. Goodness. But yeah, Bubba is Bubba. There's no contest with him. I don't know if there's really much to say. Just love Bubba. He's good. So, on to the Dreamweavers. To be completely honest, when I was making the joke video, I was really considering just not even trying to make jokes for the Dreamweavers because I really thought I wasn't able to make any, and to be honest, I barely did. And was just going to play Dreamweaver in the background and just do a very fast, quick edit of just like all of the Dreamweavers over a few seconds of Dreamweaver. But I came up with stuff. When it comes to the ranking for the Dreamweavers, there's a lot that we can kind of just skip through because the Dreamweaver designs overall are difficult to differentiate because there were obvious things that the designs were inspired by. But let's try and rank. So we're going to start off with Kosuko, who is the one who talks about getting fairies to kiss you for the super flame. There's not much to say about him, which is why I'm describing what he actually says. He has the chin beard thing, and I'm not a fan of that, and otherwise he's just kind of around and is one of like the long neck dragons that are around in the area. A lot of the Dreamweavers also carry something, and his are more candles, and I'm not interested in candles because a lot of the time they're used in very boring design. Don't stick them on top of horns, it's weird. Kabano is next, and it seems very easy to think about what kind of thing he was inspired by in order to be designed by. There's one of three things that could be in his cup that he drinks from. It could be coffee, which is pretty obvious because his animations are super twitchy, or it could be hot cocoa because that is something you would obviously drink before, like during the night and everything like that. But I think he drinks tea because there is a tea bag that actually is hanging out of the cup if you can get the right frame of the animation off of it. So if he's that twitchy from tea, he needs to stop drinking tea. And it took me that long in order to really figure out what he's actually drinking from his cup, because the stereotypes really battle against that. I put Latalo on this list as well instead of the senior list because, one, the senior list was already really long at that point, but when it comes to his voice, I didn't put him on there. I do like him a little bit, but less so than compared to other people who have a similar design as he does. His wings are very similar to other dragons, and the main thing that he kind of has is like his chest plate, which I'm not sure why he kind of has that, and then his design, and then he has the beard thing. But I think it's really just because of the lamp that he has and how much he actually focuses on it. Is there a genie inside that lamp? Especially when he rubs it at the very end as he's disappearing. Like, he's really trying to get a genie out of it. Maybe. I'm not sure. Again, I have to reach in order to make some of these dragons a little bit more interesting to me compared to some of the others. Cassia is next, and if there isn't designs that are inspired by the stars, there usually are moon designs, which is what Cassia's design is all about. And with a lot of the designs of the Dreamweavers, they just look like they're ready for bed, and with Cassia there, it definitely looks like that. I'm not sure about the bottle, though. I think it's another kind of genie bottle because there are a few other designs there. Or it could just be a humidifier for him. I'm not sure. But yeah, he's kind of lazing around as well. At least he's more helpful. But yeah, not much with Cassia either. So Madara, I had a problem in where he was going to be on the list because I really don't like his personality, but I really like his design. He's the most interesting design out of a lot of the designs in the Dreamweavers world because he's plush. That was kind of just like the thing that was all over the place. I think it's just that he really likes the dolls and the fairy dolls. It's really off-putting because I want to like him more. Like, his wings are probably my favorite design out of all of them, all of the dragon designs in the game. One of my favorites, definitely. It's just, it makes me really, really hard to like him. Yeah, I'm still gonna call it a no, though. A lot of things. He makes me uncomfortable. Zikumo's next. I like his horn design mostly just because of the star on the top of it. But when it comes to the Dreamweavers world, there's a lot of star-based designs and moon-based designs. But Zikumo is also one that kind of pushes into the design based on time, because he's the one that's holding the hourglass. A lot of them holds mundane kind of things, mainly like candles or lights of some kind. But him holding an hourglass is more interesting to me. It's just that there isn't enough to go on for me to like it a little bit more. Especially when he says, like, nicely done. Like, yeah, I released you, nicely done. There's not much else for him to really say. Next is Latif, who is a little bit better than, say, Latalo, comes to the designs. I like him a little bit more because he's more composed, except he feels like I could take yoga with him a little bit more. And compared to Latalo, he has a little bit more design, but also less design, like he's more focused. Because there's a lot going on with Latalo, especially in the head area, versus Latif, where I can actually get more features out of him. But he's still kind of halfway through the list, because I don't think of him too often. Next is Apara, and I put him this high on the list because of what he actually says. He is, out of all the dragons that are around there, he is the one that is the most kind of eager to help you and would love to help you actually do what you need to do, except because of the constraints of the game, he can't. So that kind of puts me in a higher area than compared to everything else. But when it comes to his design, I like the fact that he only has the one tooth going on. It gives me flashbacks a little bit, and then he does a little bit of things with his lantern just before he disappears, so he actually focuses on what he's carrying a little bit more. So even though he's a pretty simple design, another long neck kind of dragon, there's a little bit more to like about him and a little bit more to take away from him. Yuseni is next, and feels like a design that is just come out of nowhere. All of a sudden I rescue him and it's like, whoa, okay, this is not what I was expecting when it comes to the Dreamweavers, which I kind of like and don't like at the same time because I don't know how to fit him correctly, or figure out what kind of connection he has to the Dreamweaver theme. But I like him nonetheless, just because he is very unique. It's kind of the same reason why I like characters like Trondo or Magnus in a sense. Eunuch is next, and he is a character that I just kind of unabashedly like because when it comes to dream weaving, they really stretched it when it comes to weaving and put him in music. It feels like he would be more at home in the artisan world because he would be creating music compared to a lot of the other artisans and how much they really went for painters. But I like that his design even just like exists at all, and the amount of just little touches and details that they put into his design, from his tail to his middle to carrying a little harp. I don't know, I like it a whole lot. So now we have our top three, and for the Dreamweavers, we're actually starting with a rather weird one, and that is Revelo. Revelo is a yarn dragon, and I believe is just consisted all of yarn. Looking at even at his concept art, he is literally knitting from his tail, and there doesn't seem to be anything underneath his tail, so he's just all yarn. He is by far the most unique out of all of them, and his animations just are perfect for him. He's also a little bit of a nutball as well when it comes to him being the one you rescue before the boss of the Dreamweavers. But yeah, it's like I keep thinking about him, which is why he just like slides into my top three. He's a very special one, definitely. Number 2 is Azizi, and the obvious reason for why Azizi is also here is because he's the second dragon who has very cool things on his wings. Lucas had the treasure map, Azizi has the constellations on his wings, and I like that idea a lot. I also didn't put him in the old category because I like him so much. He would have just easily skyrocketed into that category, and he's already number 2 on the Dreamweavers list. The other thing I like about him is that I have to kind of guess, because you don't get to see him a whole lot, because he only has the releasing line, is that I think he's blind, which is something I wasn't expecting at all, and I'm like, oh, okay. That's something that you can definitely do. His tail design is a mix between the moon and also has a little bit of the stars on that. It's the best use of the star inspiration for all of the dragons of the Dreamweavers. I like it a lot. And my number 1 Dreamweaver is an unexpected one, even for me, once I was going through the list. It's Obasi. And I like it because he kind of encapsulates the term of a Dreamweaver to me. He doesn't fit with the other kind of stereotypes that the other dragons outside of like Yuseni kind of fit into it. He feels like he could be the equivalent of the Sandman in terms of weaving dreams for other people who are sleeping. He would be just kind of on his own, and other people would talk about him, but nobody would have actually met him. His staff is super cool. It's the biggest and most elaborate out of them all, with everything revolving around it. Even when I was thinking of like other things to really write about him in terms of jokes, there wasn't a whole lot. I could just go like with superhero jokes because of his whole mask thing that he has around him. But really, he just seems so just like disconnected and higher compared to everybody else in the Dreamweaver world. Like he's actually doing the actual dream weaving compared to anybody else. So he's really my number 1 because he's fascinating for me. So now we got the old category. Let's see who is my best old boy out of our 15 that I've taken out of each of the lists. So starting with number 15. We have Aster to begin with, and the thing we have to get rid of in the senior/old category, I'm probably going to be interchanging those words, is that a lot of them really just have to do with the memory loss kind of joke with a lot of the older dragons, which gets old pretty quickly. Aster you see twice, one at the beginning of the game because he keeps misremembering how many things to collect in order to actually collect everything. But when it comes to Aster, there really isn't much to him other than being old, in a sense. I think the last thing that's really mentioned needed for Aster is that he really has a creepy way of introducing a story. I'm going like, why? Why did it have to be that way? There's a lot of better ways, and we have 14 other examples of actually doing that. Altera I kind of like, but I wasn't able to really justify putting him any higher than this. He has the same kind of amnesia stuff, and his horns are really nice, and he has the whole feather thing going on, and his design is great. There's better versions of him from other dragons that I've already talked about, and what really brings him down is just everything that he says, which is really just a shame because I wanted to see him do more stuff with his orb or involve that a little bit more, and when the game makes the orb disappear, you know that there's kind of just like a disconnect in that point. Next up is Damon, and I like him because of his simple design. He's just carrying a potion with him, and he's a witch doctor in the swamp, and that's what I like about him. Not much to really say beyond that, other than other age stuff and him rambling on. Again, more old jokes. Let's move on. Next is Bakari, and I kind of wish there was more to Bakari because the main thing I kind of like with him is his wing design. Don't really like that he has a whole lot of hats or cozies, I guess, that are just kind of put on all of his horns. It makes him look a little bit silly, and I kind of wish there was a little bit more to the patterns that were all over his body. But yeah, I feel that there is too much of a mismatch with everything that's kind of going on with him. Boulder's pretty good because he has a lot of energy behind him compared to others. I guess Bakari also had a little bit of energy, but Boulder I kind of like mainly because of the horns that the Magic Crafters have, and if you're into the big jaw, he's got that going on as well. And the main thing I find endearing about him is that even though he is as old as he is, he's still fascinated about flying, and I like that a lot, to be completely honest. When it comes to his pot, though, I guess they just needed to give him something with his design, but it really isn't much to him having that pot, other than me finding a very weird song. Yeah, so there you go. Zeke is next with a intriguing design, but not much else. He kind of makes me think of The Hobbit and Radagast the Brown and just having stuff all over him. And the main thing I could think about with Zeke is that he could be one of those old dragons that kind of just sleeps for a few hundred years and everything just kind of grows over him. I would like to think that's what kind of an inspiration that the artist kind of had for Zeke, but I can only speculate. And then eventually he would wake up and then would have all of the stuff on him. But in this case, it was like only snails, really, and that was about it. So yeah, it was kind of a failed potential, which leaves Zeke at this point in the list. Now that we're getting up to the middle of the list, Ivor is the one that's going to start us off. And I like Ivor for the same reason I kind of like Conan, in a sense. Except I don't like him that much because, again, the oldness kind of brings him down. Just going like, ever since, he cuts himself off, which is kind of a shame. Because the main thing I kind of like about Ivor is the same reason I kind of like Conan is because he has a history to him. I feel like if he was like in a movie of some kind, he would be like the old war veteran who would be getting like his last chance at honor and would go out in blazing glory for one last time before the end of the movie, and like he would fit that role a whole lot. But I don't like him enough in order to put him any higher, which really sucks because there's so much I could say about him. But when it comes to my own personal opinion, I like other old dragons a little bit more because of other reasons. This list was really close. Like, for instance, the next person after Ivor is Hexus, and I really just like Hexus because of his design. He's very simple, but I can attach myself a little bit better to Hexus because he's what I kind of picture a wizard to be, or a dragon wizard. He's He's really simple, but I love him for that. Especially with his staff. Like, I made the Dumbledore reference, and that was why. Because he has that bird staff of his. Could be a phoenix, could be something else. Doesn't really matter. I do like Hexus, but more for simple measures instead of me reaching like Ivor. Next up is Jed, and I like Jed because of his striking colors that he actually has compared to a lot of others. He's also one of those older dragons that still has a lot of pep and sass to him, especially since he breaks the fourth wall in terms of being that really difficult dragon to get in treetops. Because he just shrugs and goes like, yep, what can I do? I was put up here. That's no problem. But yeah, it's more of just like a simple attachment for Jed and the fact that he's the one that breaks the fourth wall. Thor is next, and he's the last of the Artisans that I actually have to talk about. He's the potter of all of them, and there's something about Thor that I liked more and more the more I saw him. Because not only was he the potter, but he actually has design elements that make me think more of him as being this kind of like hybrid in a sense of being more of a dragon and more of a bull kind of in a sense, from his snout to his horns to the braids that he kind of has. And even though that is just clay that's kind of splattered on there, it's splattered on in a sense that it makes me think of cow print. I just kind of got this feeling about it. I'm probably completely wrong, but it made me like him a little bit more because of the creativeness that they took with this specific design. Next up is Mazzy, and I like Mazzy just because he is the one who is able to still put on an entrance despite his age. So he swoops up, he turns his back on you, does a pose, and then starts talking to you, and even has a nice like battle pose at the very end of it. He still looks like he could give out a thrashing if he really needs to, especially with the way he talks about the fools, and he just like wants to just beat them. I like it. I wanted to see him in action. He's another one of those dragons that I just want to see do some stuff. I want to see these dragons do some stuff. That is never going to happen, but I want to see that. Asher's next, and he just scrapes under the top 3 because the reason for it is that he's certainly the most physically capable out of all of the senior dragons that are in the game. He has the subtle animations that are really good, and most people latch onto him because he is your buff grandpa that you would definitely want. And when it comes to his overall design, it's very simple, but what the animations do for it elevate it, especially when it comes to his tiny glasses, because he's able to just pick them off with very little trouble in order to just like reposition them, and has good expression. It's great. Sometimes simple just is enough to really get. But now it's time for the top 3. Who are the top 3 seniors? First up is Baruti. He's my number 3, and he was actually at the bottom of the list for a very long time until I really took a good long look at his design, and not just because of the joke I made. The reason is because he's carrying a fishing rod, and that means he's fishing grandpa, and I am so simple, and I'm going like, oh my god, I love him even more than I did beforehand. My god, how did I miss that for so long? Yeah, that's the only reason why he's in number 3, is because he goes fishing. Nobody else does, and it comes to this point where I'm just like, yeah, he fishes, he's number 3 at least. Number 2 is Eldred, and Eldred I skipped over as well, because he was just kind of the old guy, and again, he does the release line, the same that Baruti does. But then I looked at it a little bit closer, and not only is he like one of the scientists for the magic crafters, but he's also my 3rd dragon with the things on his wings, and this one is mathematical equations. He gets the number 2 spot because his design actually just kind of wore on me a whole lot more and more and more. His bottle goggle glasses are even better, and he stretches when you release him and actually has a little bit more spunk, even though you only really see him for a few seconds. And I'm gonna savor those seconds because that's all I can really do. He's really good. His horns are also like another thing that's mechanical in a sense. He's actually one of like the unique one in that sense compared to other wing ones like Marco. And then speaking of wings, my number 1, my favorite senior out of all of them, is Xander. It took me a while to really get into Xander, but my first impression, of course, was his wings, because they are the most interesting wings out of them all. There's Marco, and depending on how he was getting them, or whether or not those were his actual wings or not, or whatever his history might be. When it comes to the Magic Crafter's world and Xander's wings, they are even more special because they're magic, and that's all I can really explain it as. But when it comes to the older guys, the general demeanor that Xander has is one that is very similar to how I feel about Gildas, and except that, like, Gildas I could get lost in his eyes and he makes me happy. When it comes to Xander, I know that he's kind of like really dependable, a lot of things that are really more focused on me, but his overall design, though, is something that I really like as well. I'm not really sure how to describe it, just a little bit more full of a design. His tail's nice. I'm wondering what kind of, like, position he really has with the Magic Crafters being as old as he is, and what kind of things he could do. He could bring death to the universe if he really wanted to, if you made him angry enough, but I feel like he's too happy for that. Don't piss off Xander, I guess. So with that, that is all 74 of the dragons ranked, and there are my top 6. I'm not going to even try to rank what is actually my favorite out of those 6, so I'll just leave that in the open. I rather have just a group than just one to really be happy with. There's all of them. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time for something completely different that is less unscripted than this. Alright, take care, everyone.